A millionaire bumps into a simple young woman from the countryside and discovers something about her that leaves him obsessed. The sound of Sebastian Cole's boots crunching on the gravel echoed along the dusty road that snaked through the hills of the Arizona countryside. With his Italian leather briefcase under his arm and sunglasses reflecting the merciless sun, he looked decidedly out of place in that rural setting. The coordinates on his GPS indicated that he was arriving at his destination, Silverstone Farm, a 500-acre property that would soon become his next multimillion-dollar venture. Sebastian checked his Rolex, 10:47. The broker had made the appointment for 11 a.m., and he hated delays. As he drove his Land Rover down the driveway, his mind was already calculating the possibilities. An exclusive resort with a spa, golf course, and private villas. The wealthy of Phoenix would pay fortunes to escape the heat of the city in a private oasis in the mountains. The property was even more impressive in person than in the photos. A two-story colonial-style main house rose majestically, surrounded by fields that stretched as far as the eye could see. Sebastian parked next to the house, adjusted his navy blue tie, and got out of the car. It was then that he saw her for the first time. A young woman was hurrying towards an old pickup truck, carrying a precarious pile of papers and folders. Her auburn hair was tied up in a messy bun, and she was wearing faded jeans and a plaid shirt rolled up to her elbows. Completely absorbed in her thoughts, she didn't notice Sebastian approaching the entrance. The inevitable happened in a matter of seconds. She turned sharply. Sebastian couldn't dodge in time, and the papers flew like confetti into the Arizona air. "Oh my God, I'm sorry," she exclaimed, immediately bending down to pick up the scattered documents. "I should have paid more attention." Sebastian knelt down to help her, picking up one of the leaves that landed near her feet. His eyes caught words like sustainable irrigation and regenerative agriculture before she gently took it back. "Rose Wilson," she introduced herself, extending a calloused hand. "I'm the resident agronomist, or was, until yesterday." "Sebastian Cole," he replied, noticing how her eyes, a deep, intelligent green, narrowed slightly on hearing his name. "So you're the man who's going to turn all this into a playground for rich people," she commented, her voice maintaining a surprisingly neutral tone. Sebastian felt a twinge of irritation. "I prefer to think that I'm going to give this property a new purpose." Rose finished organizing her papers, pressing them against her chest as if they were a shield. "Yes, because feeding people is clearly an inferior purpose to serving cocktails by the pool." It was then that Sebastian noticed something in the documents she was holding, a set of graphs and data that seemed revolutionary even at first glance. "What exactly were you developing here?" Rose hesitated, biting her lower lip. For a moment, Sebastian thought she wouldn't answer, but then something in her eyes changed. "A sustainable farming system specifically for arid regions. It combines ancient Native American techniques with modern water conservation technology." Sebastian found himself genuinely intrigued. "Does it work?" "See for yourself," she replied, guiding him to a nearby experimental field. The contrast was striking. On one side, parched, barren land. On the other, vibrant rows of vegetation. "With this system, we can reduce water consumption by 70% and increase production by 40%. Rose explained, her face lighting up with passion. "Imagine the impact this could have on communities struggling with drought." Sebastian watched the demonstration in silence, his businessman's mind already calculating the implications. The potential was immense, far greater than a simple luxury resort. But there was a problem. "Why are you leaving then?" he asked, watching her intently. Rose let out a tired sigh. "The farm was sold, remember? And even before that, it was difficult to get funding to continue the research. Nobody wants to invest in sustainable agriculture when they can profit from more profitable ventures." The midday sun was beating down on them now, but Sebastian hardly noticed the heat. His mind was racing, analyzing possibilities, calculating risks. The resort was a safe investment. He'd done it before. He knew the market. He knew exactly how much he could profit. But this was different. It was bigger. "What if," he began, choosing his words carefully, "what if there was a way to continue your work here?" Rose looked at him suspiciously. "What do you mean?" "I haven't officially bought the property yet. The contract hasn't been signed. Sebastian, Rose said his name with a mixture of hope and skepticism. Are you suggesting? The sound of an approaching car interrupted the conversation. The realtor had arrived, punctually at 11 a.m. Sebastian watched Rose start to walk away towards her pickup, carrying not only her papers, but also an idea that could change everything. Rose, he called, making her stop. Don't go too far. I think we need to talk more about this project of yours. She nodded slightly, a small smile appearing on her lips, before getting into her car and driving off in a cloud of red Arizona dust. Sebastian adjusted his tie again, his perfectly organized plan for the resort now completely messed up by an accidental meeting and a pile of papers flying in the wind. The broker approached with a professional smile and a folder full of contracts, but Sebastian barely heard him. His mind was occupied with different figures now, not resort profits, but water-saving percentages and increases in agricultural production. For the first time in a long time, Sebastian Cole was considering doing something completely unpredictable, and that scared and excited him in equal measure. Sebastian spent the sleepless night in the small hotel in Prescott. The documents Rose had dropped scattered on his king-size bed. He had managed to discreetly save a few pages during the confusion, and now every line he read convinced him even more that he was facing something extraordinary. Rose's method wasn't just innovative, it was revolutionary. His fingers glided over his tablet, frantically researching sustainable agriculture and irrigation systems. Financial projections began to take shape in his mind. If her system worked on a large scale, the return would be exponentially greater than any luxury resort. At 6:30 a.m., Sebastian was already on his feet, adjusting his button-down shirt as his coffee cooled on the table. He had spent the last 2 hours tracking down Rose Wilson online. He discovered that she had graduated with honors from Stanford, turned down offers from large agribusiness corporations to develop her project independently, and published several articles on regenerative agriculture in respected scientific journals. "Miss Wilson," he muttered to himself, "you're a lot more interesting than you look." After a few phone calls and a small bribe to the local real estate secretary, Sebastian discovered that Rose was living temporarily in a trailer park in nearby Prescott Valley. The contrast couldn't have been greater. Him in his state-of-the-art Land Rover, parked next to weathered mobile homes. Rose was sitting in a plastic chair in front of a modest trailer, laptop on her lap, cup of coffee by her side. She looked up as Sebastian's shadow blocked her morning sun. "How did you find me?" she asked, without sounding particularly surprised. "I have my resources," Sebastian replied, pulling out another plastic chair to sit on. "And a proposal for you." Rose closed her laptop, her green eyes studying him cautiously. "Let me guess. You want to buy my research for some corporation?" "No," Sebastian smiled. "I want to be your partner." The silence that followed was filled only by the distant sound of children playing and dogs barking. Rose picked up her coffee cup, taking a long sip before answering. "Why?" "Because your system can change the world." Sebastian leaned forward, his voice low and intense. "And because I can provide the resources to make it possible." "And the resort?" "Instead of building a playground for the rich, we can turn Silverstone Farm into a center for research and development in sustainable agriculture," Sebastian explained, his enthusiasm growing as he shared his vision. "Imagine experimental fields, state-of-the-art laboratories, training programs for farmers from all over the world." Rose placed the cup on the plastic table with a little more force than necessary. "That would cost millions." "I have millions," Sebastian replied simply. "And contacts. I can get additional funding, partnerships with universities, government support. Why should I trust you?" Rose asked, but Sebastian noticed that there was something different in her voice now. A note of hope that she was trying, unsuccessfully, to hide. "Because," he took out the papers he had kept in his briefcase, "I spent the whole night studying your research. This isn't just a business deal for me, Rose. It's an opportunity to do something meaningful." Rose took the papers, a small smile appearing on her lips. "You stole my documents?" "I'd rather say I preserved them for closer examination," Sebastian smiled back. "So, what do you say? Partners?" Rose stood up, walking to the edge of the small deck of her trailer. The morning sun had fully risen now, bathing the Arizona desert in shades of gold and red. Sebastian could see the gears turning in her mind, weighing up risks and possibilities. "I want everything in writing," she finally said, turning to face him. "Full control over the scientific part of the project. And I want part of the profits to go towards assistance programs for rural communities in need." "Done," Sebastian replied without hesitation, holding out his hand. Rose squeezed it, her small, calloused hand meeting his, soft and manicured. "If you're cheating on me, Sebastian Cole, I swear—" "I'm not," he interrupted her, his voice serious. "Trust me." The moment was interrupted by the sound of a notification on Sebastian's cell phone. It was a message from the realtor, asking if he was still interested in the property. Rose peeked at the message over his shoulder. "Last chance to back out," she commented. "There's still time to build your resort." Sebastian quickly typed a reply confirming his interest in the purchase, but with a significant change to the plan for using the property. "Not a chance," he replied, putting the phone away. "Now, how about you show me in more detail how this revolutionary irrigation system of yours works?" Rose smiled, a genuine smile that lit up her whole face. "I'll need more coffee first, and you'll have to change those Italian shoes for something more suitable for walking in mud." As Rose went into the trailer to get more coffee, Sebastian looked down at his handmade leather shoes and smiled. His life had taken a completely unexpected turn in the last 24 hours, and for the first time in a long time, he was genuinely excited about the future. It wasn't just about business now, it was about making a difference. And maybe, just maybe, it was also about something else that was beginning to sprout between him and a brilliant agronomist with green eyes and a vision to change the world. The first week of Sebastian and Rose's partnership was a roller coaster of emotions and discoveries. The makeshift office in the old barn at Silverstone Farm was covered in plants, graphics, and laptops, creating a curious mix between the rustic and the modern. Sebastian had swapped his Italian suits for khakis and long-sleeved shirts. Although he still kept his Rolex, some changes took longer. "We need to present this in a way that attracts investors," Sebastian commented, looking at the spreadsheets in his notebook. "Your data is impressive, but we have to translate science into business language." Rose looked up from a soil sample she was examining. "You mean, make it seem more profitable and less about saving the planet?" "The two don't have to be mutually exclusive," Sebastian replied, turning his notebook around to show her. "Look at these figures. If we implemented your system on just 10% of the farms in the southwestern United States, the water savings would be enough to supply an average city for a year. That has monetary and humanitarian value." "Since when did you become an environmentalist?" Rose teased, but there was a genuine smile on her lips. "Since a certain stubborn agronomist showed me that there is a better way of doing things," he replied, holding her gaze for a moment longer than necessary. The moment was interrupted by the sound of tires on gravel. Through the barn window, they saw a van approaching, carrying the first load of equipment for the laboratory. Sebastian had made good use of his contacts, getting donations from universities and companies interested in the project. "I still can't believe you managed all this in a week," Rose commented, watching the team unload microscopes and other sophisticated equipment. "You underestimate me, Miss Wilson," Sebastian smiled, but then his expression turned serious. "There's something we need to discuss. I've received an invitation to present the project at a sustainable agriculture conference in San Francisco next month." Rose froze. "Sebastian, we're not ready to—" "Yes, we are," he interrupted her gently. "Your data is solid, the system works. We need to start publicizing it if we want to make a real difference. But what if they don't take it seriously? What if they think it's just another idealistic project with no foundation?" The insecurity in his voice was palpable. Sebastian approached, putting his hands on her shoulders. "Rose, I've spent the last 15 years convincing people to invest in my ideas. Trust me when I say that your project is more valuable than all the resorts I've ever built." The warmth of his hands ran through the thin fabric of Rose's shirt, and for a moment, the air between them seemed to carry a different electricity. Rose pulled away first, turning her attention to the soil samples. "All right," she finally agreed. "But on one condition, I want us to visit some rural communities before the conference. We need to really understand the impact this could have." "Done," Sebastian replied immediately. In fact, I've already scheduled some visits for next week, including a Navajo reservation that's been struggling with irrigation problems. Rose stared at him in surprise. You're really taking this seriously, aren't you? More than anything I've ever done, he admitted, surprising himself with the sincerity in his voice. The rest of the afternoon was spent organizing the laboratory and finalizing preparations for the field trips. As they worked side by side, Sebastian couldn't help but notice how Rose changed when she talked about her work. Her eyes shone with passion, her hands gestured animatedly, and occasionally her arm brushed his as she pointed to something on a graph or explained a complex concept. In the evening, when they had finally finished, Rose insisted on showing Sebastian her favorite place on the farm. They climbed a small hill behind the barn, where a worn wooden bench offered a panoramic view of the property. This place is going to change a lot over the next few months, Rose commented, watching the sun set over the experimental fields. For the better, Sebastian replied, taking a seat next to her. But we'll keep this bench, I promise. Rose laughed. The mighty Sebastian Cole, making promises about an old bench? Hey, I'm trying to be romantic here, he joked. But the words came out before he could contain them. A silence fell between them, laden with unspoken possibilities. Rose was the first to break it. We need to keep things professional, she said softly. There's a lot at stake. Of course, Sebastian agreed quickly, ignoring the tightness in his chest. Professional is my middle name. I thought it was James, Rose teased, getting up. Come on, we still have to prepare the presentation for the investors tomorrow. As they walked down the hill, Sebastian reflected on how his life had changed dramatically in just 1 week. The man who used to live for profits and luxuries now found himself dreaming of irrigation systems and social impact. And, even more disturbingly, he found himself dreaming of a certain green-eyed agronomist who insisted on keeping things professional. The sun finally disappeared over the horizon, painting the Arizona sky in shades of pink and purple. In the barn-turned laboratory, the light stayed on late into the night as two very different idealists worked together to change the world, one field at a time. The visit to the Navajo reservation in Window Rock turned out to be more impactful than Sebastian could have imagined. While his Land Rover drove along the dusty roads of the reservation, Rose sat next to him studying maps and data about the region. The contrast between their luxurious vehicle and the modest houses around them did not go unnoticed by either of them. The water shortage rates here are alarming, Rose commented, her fingers tracing lines on a graph. In the last 5 years, the situation has only worsened with climate change. Sebastian parked next to a community center where they were greeted by Maria Bagay, a respected community elder. Her dark eyes, marked by decades of wisdom, studied the visitors with interest. So you're the farm people who promised to make the desert bloom, Maria commented, a slight smile playing on her lips. Actually, Sebastian began, but Rose interrupted him. We've come to learn as much as to teach, she said, surprising Sebastian. We know that your people have centuries of knowledge about cultivation in arid lands. Maria's smile widened. Finally, someone who understands. Come on, I want to show you something. Over the next few hours, Maria guided them through different areas of the reserve. She showed them traditional water conservation techniques that had been passed down for generations, but which were becoming insufficient in the face of increasingly severe climate change. What worries me most are the children, Maria explained, stopping near a school. In the playground, children were playing, seemingly oblivious to the concerns of the adults. How can we guarantee their future if we don't even have enough water? Sebastian watched Rose bend down to examine the parched soil. Her fingers sank into the earth, and he could see the gears of her mind at work, adapting her system to the specific needs of that place. With a few modifications, we can implement a pilot project here, Rose said, standing up, starting with a community garden near the school. If it works? When it works, Sebastian corrected her, surprising himself with his certainty. We can expand to other areas of the reserve. Maria watched them with renewed interest. You've changed since you got here, she commented to Sebastian. Your eyes look different. Sebastian felt an involuntary blush creep up his neck. Let's just say I had a good teacher, he replied, casting a quick glance at Rose, who pretended to be busy with her notes. The rest of the afternoon was dedicated to measurements, sample collection, and initial planning. Sebastian was impressed by the ease with which Rose communicated with the community, mixing technical knowledge with genuine respect for local traditions. As the sun began to set, Maria invited them to her home for a traditional dinner. Sitting around a simple table, eating lamb stew and fried bread, Sebastian realized that he didn't feel as uncomfortable as he had expected. On the contrary, there was something comforting about the simplicity and authenticity of the moment. "You make a good team," Maria commented over dinner, her keen eyes alternating between Sebastian and Rose. Different, but complementary, like the sun and the moon. Rose almost choked on her tea, and Sebastian had to disguise his own reaction. "We're just business partners," he clarified quickly. "Ma'am," Maria murmured, an enigmatic smile on her face. "Time will tell." On the drive back to the ranch, a comfortable silence filled the car. The Arizona sky was painted with stars, and the crescent moon cast a silvery light over the desert landscape. "We need to readjust our presentation for San Francisco," Rose finally said. "After today, I realize we were focusing on the wrong aspects." "What do you mean?" "It's not just about numbers and profits," she explained, turning to face him. "It's about people, entire communities that can have their lives transformed." Sebastian nodded slowly. "You're right. We'll rewrite everything tomorrow." Arriving at the farm, they were both exhausted but energized by the possibilities that were opening up. However, before Rose could make her way to her trailer, she had refused to move into the main house, despite Sebastian's insistence. He called out to her. "Rose?" "Yes?" "Thank you for today. For showing me, well, all of this." She smiled, and for a moment Sebastian felt his heart skip a beat. "Thank you for being willing to watch." That night, lying in his bed in the main house, Sebastian reflected on how his life had changed in such a short time. A few weeks ago, his biggest concern was the design of the resort's spa. Now, he was thinking about irrigation systems, food safety, and the smile of a certain agronomist who insisted on sleeping in a trailer when there was an entire mansion at her disposal. His phone vibrated with a message from his former partner in Phoenix. "Are you out of your mind? Sustainable agriculture? You're a real estate developer, for God's sake." Sebastian looked out of the window at Rose's trailer where a light was still on, probably her still working on her calculations and adjustments to the project. He smiled and replied, "Maybe I found my head for the first time." He turned off his cell phone and picked up his laptop. There was a presentation to rewrite and a world to change, one field at a time. The week leading up to the conference in San Francisco was a whirlwind of activity at Silverstone Farm. The old barn, now transformed into a modern laboratory, was buzzing with the energy of a small team Sebastian had hired to help prepare the data and demonstrations. "The slides are ready," announced Rose, rubbing her tired eyes after hours in front of the computer. "But we still need to finalize the prototype of the miniature irrigation system for the live demonstration." Sebastian, who was on the phone finalizing the details of the trip, disconnected the call and approached her desk. "About that, I got something special for the presentation." Rose raised an eyebrow, suspicious. "What did you do?" "I invited Maria Bagay and some members of the Navajo community to participate in the conference," he revealed, a satisfied smile on his face. "They're going to talk about the potential impact of the project on their lives." Rose's eyes widened. "Sebastian, that's perfect," she admitted, genuinely impressed. "But how did you manage to convince them?" "Let's just say I've learned a few things about building trust over the last few weeks," he replied, his gaze meeting hers for a moment longer than necessary. The moment was interrupted by Dr. Chen, one of the hired scientists, who rushed into the lab. "You need to see this," he exclaimed, holding up a tablet. "The results of the latest soil tests are in." The three of them pored over the data, and Rose let out an exclamation of surprise. "Soil regeneration is happening 40% faster than our initial projections." "In less scientific terms?" Sebastian asked, although he was already beginning to understand the technical language better. "It means we're not just saving water," Rose explained, her eyes shining with enthusiasm. "We're literally bringing dead land back to life, and faster than we thought possible." Sebastian watched Rose immerse herself in a lively technical discussion with Dr. Chen, her expressive gestures and radiant smile lighting up her face. It was in these moments that she was at her most beautiful, he thought, when she was completely absorbed in her passion for her work. "We need to reorganize the presentation to include this data," Rose declared, turning her attention to Sebastian. "Do you have any plans for tonight?" "Just a dinner with some potential investors in Phoenix," he replied, checking his watch. "But I can cancel." "No, don't cancel," Rose insisted. "I'm going to work on the new data with the team. Besides," she hesitated for a moment, "I need to concentrate, and you've been a bit distracting lately." The comment hung in the air between them, loaded with unspoken meanings. Sebastian adjusted his tie, a gesture Rose noticed he made when he was nervous. "All right," he agreed, trying to maintain a professional tone. "But tomorrow we need to finalize everything. The flight to San Francisco is in 2 days." Later that evening, over dinner in Phoenix, Sebastian found himself struggling to concentrate on conversations about return on investment and financial projections. His mind kept going back to the barn, to Rose and her tireless dedication to the project. His phone vibrated with a message from her. "We've discovered something incredible in the data. You won't believe it when you see it. P.S. I brought your favorite breakfast from the trailer to the lab fridge. I know you'll head straight here when you get back." Sebastian smiled into the phone, ignoring the curious glances from the other executives at the table. How did she know he was going straight to the lab? When had she started to notice his habits, his preferences? "Sebastian?" The voice of one of the investors brought him back to reality. "You seem different. More happy." "Things are different," he admitted, putting the phone away. "Better." The rest of dinner passed in a blur, and before he knew it, Sebastian was driving back to the ranch, a starry Arizona night serving as a backdrop to his muddled thoughts. He had built his career on being calculating and focused, never letting emotions interfere with business decisions. But now, the lights in the laboratory were still on when he arrived, as he had expected. Rose was asleep on her desk, papers scattered around her, her auburn hair falling over her face. Sebastian resisted the urge to push an unruly lock away from her cheek. Instead, he gently placed his jacket over her shoulders and sat down at his own desk, beginning to review the new data the team had left organized. The coffee Rose had saved for him was waiting in the fridge, along with a note. "Don't work too late. We have to be rested to impress San Francisco." Sebastian smiled, realizing that it was becoming increasingly difficult to keep things as strictly professional as they had agreed. But for now, there was work to do and a world to change. The rest would have to wait, at least until after the conference. The Fairmont Hotel on Nob Hill sparkled like a jewel in the San Francisco night, its golden lights contrasting with the city's characteristic haze. Sebastian adjusted his tie for the 10th time as he waited for Rose in the lobby. The conference would officially start the next morning, but this evening there was a welcome cocktail for the participants. "Sorry I'm late." Rose's voice made him turn around, and for a moment Sebastian lost his breath. She had swapped her usual jeans for a simple but elegant emerald green dress, and her normally tied-up hair was loose, framing her face. "Are you?" he began, but was interrupted by Maria Baguet, who had approached with her group. "Ah, young Rose," Maria smiled. "As green as the fields you promised to make bloom." The moment of tension between Sebastian and Rose dissipated, and soon the group headed for the hall where the cocktail party was being held. The room was filled with scientists, entrepreneurs, and environmentalists, all there to discuss the future of sustainable agriculture. "Sebastian Cole," a familiar voice called out. "I can't believe it's you." Marcus Reynolds, an old colleague from his real estate development days, approached with a drink in hand. "Are the rumors true then? Did you really swap luxury resorts for farming?" Sebastian felt Rose tense up next to him. "Actually, Marcus, we're developing a revolutionary system of..." "Revolutionary?" Marcus laughed. "Come on, Sebastian, you've always been pragmatic. How long before you realize you're throwing money away?" "Mr. Reynolds," Rose intervened, her voice calm but firm. "Perhaps you'd like to meet Maria Baguet? She can tell you firsthand how our project is impacting her community." Marcus seemed disconcerted by the interruption, but before he could reply, Sebastian led Rose away, towards the hotel terrace. "You didn't have to defend me," he said when they were alone, the bay breeze gently ruffling Rose's hair. "I wasn't defending you," she replied with a small smile. "I was defending our work." "Our job," Sebastian repeated, savoring the words. "You know, a month ago I would have agreed with Marcus. I would have thought the whole thing was crazy. And now?" "Now," he moved a little closer, "now I can't imagine doing anything else." The air between them was charged with unspoken electricity. Rose took a small step back, keeping a professional distance. "We need to go over the presentation one more time," she said, her voice slightly shaky. "Rose," Sebastian began, but they were interrupted by Dr. Chun, who had appeared on the terrace looking for them. "The final test results are in," he announced, handing over his tablet. "It's even better than we expected." The next few hours were spent adjusting the presentation with the new data. Back in his hotel room, Sebastian couldn't sleep. At 3 in the morning, he heard a soft knock on his door. It was Rose, still dressed, carrying her laptop. "I've got an idea for the practical demonstration," she said, entering without waiting for an invitation. "If we change the sequence—" "Rose," Sebastian interrupted her gently, "you need to rest." "I can't," she admitted, sitting down on the edge of the bed. "What if we're not convincing enough? What if no one takes it seriously?" Sebastian sat down next to her. "Hey, look at me," he asked softly. "Your work is brilliant. The data is irrefutable. And most importantly, it's working. Maria and her community are living proof of that." Rose nodded slowly, letting out a tired sigh. "When did you become the optimist of the pair?" "Probably the same moment you made me realize that there's more to life than profits," he replied, his gaze meeting hers. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken possibilities. Rose was the first to break it, standing up abruptly. "I need to get some sleep. Tomorrow's the big day." "Rose," Sebastian called out to her as she stood in the doorway. "Whatever happens tomorrow, I'm proud of what we've built." She smiled, a genuine smile that lit up her tired eyes. "Me too, Sebastian. Me too." After she left, Sebastian stayed awake for a few more hours, watching the lights of San Francisco from the hotel window. Tomorrow they would present to a room full of people who could turn their project into a global reality. But at that moment, all he could think about was Rose's smile, and how his life had changed completely since that accidental meeting on the phare. The sun was just beginning to rise over the bay when he finally fell asleep, dreaming of green fields blooming in the desert and a green-eyed agronomist who had taught him to see the world in a completely new way. The large auditorium of the San Francisco Convention Center was packed when Sebastian and Rose took their seats on stage. The bright lights partially obscured the view of the audience, but Sebastian could make out familiar faces: Maria Begay and her Navajo delegation in the front rows, Marcus Reynolds with his skeptical smile in the background, and a mix of scientists, investors, and environmentalists filling the space. "Ladies and gentlemen," the moderator began, "it is with great pleasure that we present Silverstone Farm's innovative project, Cultivating Hope in Arid Lands." Rose stepped forward, her voice initially shaky but gaining strength with each word. "Imagine a world where water scarcity doesn't determine who can and can't grow food, where entire communities don't have to choose between drinking and irrigating their crops." The next 2 hours were a perfectly choreographed dance between science and business. Rose presented the technical data with a clarity that made complex concepts accessible, while Sebastian translated this into terms of social impact and economic viability. The most powerful moment, however, came when Maria Begay took to the stage. "My people have been fighting drought for generations," Maria began, her voice carrying the weight of history. "But for the first time, we see a solution that respects our ancestral knowledge while embracing innovation." Sebastian watched the audience as Maria spoke. Even Marcus Reynolds had abandoned his skepticism, leaning forward in his chair. When it came time for the practical demonstration, Rose activated the miniature prototype of the irrigation system, and a murmur of admiration ran through the auditorium as they saw the efficiency of the process. "As you can see," Sebastian concluded, "this isn't just a farming project. It's a revolution in the way we think about sustainability and community development." The questions that followed were intense, but Rose and Sebastian were prepared. Every technical challenge, Every question about economic viability was answered with concrete data and practical examples. The most tense moment came when an executive from a large agricultural corporation stood up. "Impressive," he commented. "But why not sell the technology to established companies like ours? We could implement it on a global scale immediately." Rose hesitated, and Sebastian realized his dilemma. The offer was tempting: immediate implementation, unlimited resources. But before she could respond, he took the microphone. "Because this isn't just about technology," Sebastian replied, surprising himself with the conviction in his voice. "It's about empowering local communities, about teaching and learning from them. We don't just want to sell a product, we want to create a movement." The silence that followed was broken by spontaneous applause, starting with Maria and her delegation and spreading throughout the auditorium. Rose looked at Sebastian with a mixture of surprise and something deeper, something that made her heart race. After the presentation, as groups of people crowded around them with business cards and partnership proposals, Rose managed to pull Sebastian into a quiet corner of the lobby. "Do you really believe what you said up there?" she asked, studying his face. "About creating a movement instead of just selling the technology?" "Rose," Sebastian held up his hands without thinking, "a month ago I was a different man. You didn't just show me a better way to do business. You showed me a better way to live." The moment was interrupted by Dr. Chun, who approached agitatedly. "You need to see this. We already have more than 50 requests to implement the project, including 3 state governments." The next few hours were a whirlwind of impromptu meetings and promises of funding. When they finally got a moment to breathe, it was already evening and the city was glowing outside. "I think we need to celebrate," Sebastian suggested, loosening his tie. "How about dinner? I know a great restaurant in North Beach." Rose smiled, but there was a hesitation in her eyes. "Sebastian, about today?" "I know," he interrupted her gently. "We'll keep things professional. But I think we deserve a celebration, as partners." "Partners," she repeated, testing the word. "All right, but first I need to call the team at the farm. They're waiting for news." As Rose walked away to make the call, Sebastian watched the city from the window of the convention center. San Francisco sparkled under the night sky, but all he could think about was the Arizona sunshine and how his life had found a new purpose in the arid lands he had once planned to turn into a playground for the rich. The day had been a success beyond his wildest expectations, but Sebastian knew that the real work had only just begun. And, looking at Rose as she excitedly reported the day's events to the team, he realized that there was nowhere else he'd rather be. The restaurant in North Beach offered a breathtaking view of San Francisco Bay, the city lights reflecting off the dark waters like 1,000 diamonds. Sebastian had chosen a discreet table on the terrace, where the soft sound of live jazz mingled with the sea breeze. To the success of the project, he proposed in a toast, raising his wine glass. "And to the people it will help," Rose added, touching her glass to his. Dinner went smoothly as they discussed the day's events. Rose was still excited about the partnership proposals, especially those aimed at rural communities in need. "Do you know what surprised me the most today?" she asked, playing with her napkin. "You. What do you mean?" "When that executive offered to buy the technology for a moment, I thought you'd consider it. It was exactly the kind of offer that the old Sebastian Cole would have accepted without blinking." Sebastian took a thoughtful sip of wine. The old Sebastian Cole would also have turned Silverstone Farm into a pretentious resort. "What's changed?" Rose asked softly, her green eyes fixed on him. "You know what's changed, Rose," he replied, his voice huskier than usual. "Or rather, who changed everything?" The moment was interrupted by the waiter bringing dessert, but the tension between them remained, palpable like electricity in the air. Rose stirred her tiramisu without actually eating it, lost in thought. "Sebastian," she began, "we need to talk about how we're pretending there's nothing going on between us," he added, deciding it was time to face the elephant in the room. Rose placed her fork on the table with studied care. "There's a lot at stake. The project, the communities that depend on us, all the work we've built up. And you think all this would be compromised if we admitted how we feel about each other? It wouldn't be professional," she argued, but her voice betrayed uncertainty. Sebastian leaned forward. "Rose, Today we demonstrated to hundreds of people that it is possible to do business in a different, more human way. Why can't we apply that same logic to our relationship? Because I'm afraid, she finally admitted, her voice almost a whisper. Afraid of mixing things up and ending up losing everything. The project, the chance to make a difference, you. Sebastian reached across the table, gently touching hers. Do you know what Maria said to me today, after the presentation? She said that sometimes the universe puts us in collision with exactly the person we needed to find, even if we didn't know we were looking. Rose laughed softly, but didn't withdraw her hand. Since when do you believe in fate? Since I'd bumped into a stubborn awareness who overturned not only my hopes, but all my certainties about what I wanted out of life. The sound of jazz in the background seemed to lull the moment, creating an intimate bubble around them. Rose finally raised her eyes to meet his. What if it doesn't work out? What if it does? Sebastian countered. Rose, I've spent my whole life calculating risks on Excel spreadsheets. For the first time, I want to risk something that can't be quantified in numbers. She smiled, a smile that lit up her eyes in a way that made Sebastian's heart leap. Who would have thought that the powerful businessman Sebastian Cole would be capable of such a romantic speech? I have my moments, he joked, but his eyes remained serious. What do you say? In response, Rose got up from her chair and walked over to him. For a moment, Sebastian thought she was going to leave, but then she leaned over and kissed him softly. Does that answer your question? She whispered against his lips. The rest of the night passed like a dream. They walked through the streets of North Beach, talking about everything and nothing, occasionally stopping to exchange kisses that seemed at once new and familiar, as if they had waited a lifetime for this moment. Back at the hotel, they stopped in the corridor between their rooms. Tomorrow we have a full schedule of meetings, Rose reminded them, but her smile betrayed her attempt to remain serious. And we're going to face it all together, Sebastian replied, pulling her in for another kiss. When they finally separated to their respective suites, Sebastian felt like he was floating. His phone vibrated with a text message. It was a photo someone had taken during the performance, showing him and Rose side by side on stage, completely in sync in their passion for the project. You already looked like a couple even before you were one, Maria's message read, followed by a smiling emoji. Sebastian smiled at the photo, thinking about how his life had completely changed in such a short time. Tomorrow they would have to navigate this new dynamic in the midst of important meetings and negotiations. But for the first time in his life, he wasn't worried about the future, because now he knew that, whatever challenges came, he would face them all alongside the person who had not only changed his business plans, but completely transformed his heart. Returning to Arizona brought with it a new dynamic for Silverstone Farm. Success in San Francisco had transformed the project from an ambitious dream into a tangible reality, but it had also brought unexpected challenges. The former barn, now research center, was busier than ever, with new researchers and technicians joining the original team. I've just received 3 more requests to implement the system, Rose announced, entering Sebastian's makeshift office in the main house. She hesitated briefly before approaching, still adjusting to the new dimension of their relationship. Sebastian smiled, pulling her in for a quick kiss. How many does that total now? 72, she replied, taking his seat on the edge of his desk, including a particularly interesting project in New Mexico, a Hispanic community that has been fighting desertification for generations. We need to establish priority criteria, Sebastian pondered, his business mind already at work. We can't attend to everyone at the same time. Actually, Rose bit her lip, a gesture Sebastian had already learned to recognize as a sign that she had a potentially controversial idea. I've been thinking about something. What if we created a training program? Go on, he encouraged, intrigued. Instead of implementing the system directly at each site, we could bring representatives from the communities to learn here. They would come back as multipliers, able to adapt the system to the specific needs of their regions. Sebastian stood up, walking over to the window that offered a panoramic view of the experimental fields. The midday sun transformed the landscape into a mosaic of greens and golds, living proof of the success of his work. That would mean turning the farm into a training center, he reflected. We'd need additional infrastructure, dormitories, classrooms, I know it's a bigger investment than we planned, Rose admitted, but think of the long-term impact. We'd be creating a global network of shared knowledge. Sebastian turned to face her, amazed once again at her ability to dream big without losing focus on the human aspect. You never cease to amaze me. You know that? That's why you love me, she joked. But the words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. The moment was interrupted by a knock on the door. Dr. Chen entered, followed by Maria Begay, who had decided to extend her visit to help develop the community program. Sorry to interrupt, Maria smiled, her keen eyes picking up on the closeness between them. But we have a situation that needs attention. The situation was a delegation of executives from a large agricultural corporation who had arrived unannounced, interested in discussing partnership possibilities. Or, as Rose suspected, in trying again to buy the technology. Leave it to me, Sebastian assured her, adjusting his tie. You have that meeting with the technical team about adaptations for tropical climates. Sebastian, Rose took him by the arm before he left. Remember what we agreed in San Francisco? We didn't sell our souls for quick cash. He kissed her softly. Trust me. The meeting with the executives was tense, but Sebastian stood firm. When they finally left, frustrated but resigned, Maria met him on the terrace of the main house. You've really changed, she commented, watching the luxury cars disappear down the dirt road. The man I met a few months ago would have accepted their first offer. The man you knew a few months ago didn't know what really mattered, Sebastian replied, his gaze finding Rose through the lavatory window, where she was gesturing animatedly as she explained something to her team. Love and purpose, Maria smiled. A powerful combination. The rest of the afternoon was dedicated to drawing up the plan for the training center. Sebastian and Rose worked side by side, their professional attunement now intertwined with a personal intimacy that made everything more meaningful. We could start with 20 students per class, Rose suggested, sketching out a preliminary layout. 6-week courses, focusing on both the technical side and cultural adaptation. And we'll need partnerships with universities, Sebastian added. I can make some calls tomorrow. Stanford has already shown interest after the conference. As the sun began to set, tinting the Arizona sky in shades of pink and orange, they finally took a break. Sebastian led Rose to her favorite spot on the property, the bench on the hill that they had promised to preserve. Sometimes I wonder if all this is real, Rose confessed, snuggling up against him. 3 months ago I was about to give up on my dream, and now we're about to turn it into a global reality, Sebastian added, kissing her forehead. What about us? Rose turned to face him, her eyes reflecting the last ray of sunshine. We're proof that the best plans are the ones that life writes for us, even when they start with an accidental collision and papers flying everywhere. Sebastian laughed, pulling her closer. You know, I still have those papers I accidentally saved that day. Thief, she teased. But her words were silenced by a kiss. The sound of an approaching car brought them back to reality. Yet another team of researchers arriving to join the project. Rose sighed, reluctant to leave the moment. Duty calls, she muttered. It will always call us, Sebastian replied, standing up and holding out his hand to help her. But now we answer together. As they walked down the hill hand in hand, they both knew that the challenges ahead would be significant. Balancing love and work, personal dreams and global responsibility would not be easy. But there, under the endless Arizona sky, everything seemed possible. The future they had imagined separately was turning into something much greater together, a legacy that combined the best of both. Sebastian's entrepreneurial vision and Rose's humanitarian heart, united in a purpose greater than themselves. A year after the accidental meeting that changed their lives, Sebastian and Rose were once again at the entrance to Silverstone Farm. This time, however, it wasn't a collision between strangers, but a planned celebration. The old barn, now a modern research and training center, was decorated to welcome the first graduating class of the International Sustainable Agriculture Program. Remember the day we met here? Rose asked, adjusting the badge on her professional blazer, a concession to her new role as scientific director. How could I forget? You knocked over all those papers? Sebastian smiled, his hand finding hers naturally. I did. You were distracted thinking about your luxury resort. The good-natured discussion was interrupted by the arrival of the first buses. They were filled with people from different parts of the world. Farmers from New Mexico, technicians from the Navajo Reservation, experts from Texas, and even representatives from rural communities in Arizona, all united by the same purpose that had brought Sebastian and Rose together: to transform arid lands into a source of life. Maria Begay, now coordinator of the Community Outreach Program, approached the couple. "The circle closes today," she commented enigmatically. "What started with papers scattered in the wind has turned into seeds of change spreading around the world." The training center was living proof of this transformation. Where once there had been abandoned fields, there were now modern laboratories, sustainable dormitories, and experimental areas demonstrating different cultivation techniques. The former dream of the luxury resort now seemed like a distant echo of a previous life. During the opening ceremony, Sebastian watched Rose speak with the same passion that had captivated him on the first day. She spoke about environmental responsibility, community development, and the importance of combining traditional knowledge with technological innovation. Her words echoed through the packed auditorium, touching hearts and minds. "When we started this project," Rose continued, "many said it was an impossible dream, that you couldn't reconcile sustainability with economic viability, that big changes required big corporations." She paused, her eyes meeting Sebastian's. "But we discovered that the biggest changes start with unexpected encounters and the courage to rewrite our own plans." After the ceremony, while the participants explored the facilities, Sebastian led Rose to her special place, the bench on the hill they had promised to preserve. The Arizona sun painted the sky in familiar colors, but the view was completely different from what it had been a year ago. "Can you believe everything that's happened?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her shoulders. "Sometimes it seems like a dream," Rose admitted. "But then I see the results in the communities that have already implemented the system, the families who have managed to recover their land. And to think that I almost turned all this into just another playground for the rich," Sebastian laughed. But there was a note of seriousness in his voice. "Do you regret it?" Rose asked, turning to face him. In response, Sebastian pulled a small box out of his pocket. "Actually, there's only one thing I regret: not having done this sooner." The ring was simple but elegant, with a small emerald that resembled the color of Rose's eyes. "I know we promised to keep things professional," he continued, "but I think we've proven that we can balance love and work, personal dreams and global responsibility." Rose looked at the ring, then at the green fields that stretched out below them, fields that were simultaneously their professional legacy in the story of their love. "You know what's funny?" she finally said. "For someone who has always been so calculating, you have perfect timing for the important moments. Is that a yes?" In response, Rose kissed him, a kiss that carried all the promises of the future they would build together. When they parted, the sun was setting, painting the sky in the same colors as that first meeting. "Mr. Cole, Dr. Wilson," Dr. Chen's voice called out from the base of the hill. "The participants are ready for the tour of the experimental fields." Rose laughed, adjusting the ring on her finger. "Duty calls." "As always," Sebastian smiled, standing up and holding out his hand to help her. "But now it's official," we answered together. Walking down the hill hand in hand, they joined the group, eagerly waiting to learn about the system that was transforming arid lands into oases of hope. The Arizona sun shone down on Silverstone Farm, no longer just a property, but a symbol of how love can transform not just two hearts, but an entire world. Maria watched the couple approach and smiled. "See," she commented to Dr. Chen, "sometimes the best plans are the ones the universe writes for us." And so, where once there had been an accidental collision between a businessman focused on profits and a scientist dedicated to changing the world, now there was a new beginning, not just for Sebastian and Rose, but for all those who had come to learn from that example that the greatest dreams are those we share with others. Silverstone Farm would continue to grow and evolve, as would the love that had transformed it. And somewhere, lost in a drawer of Sebastian's office, were still those first papers he, accidentally, kept. A constant reminder of how life's best plans are often the ones we never plan.